Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Promise by Anima Nebbioso. The Straw Hats meet a marine girl who Luffy supposedly knows. It's me! Luffy! I don't know any Luffy. That's funny, he laughed. He stopped when she didn't laugh with him. Can you guess what happens next? They kidnap her. Huge shout out to all the warlords of this channel. You know who you are. Want to stand among legends? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios!
Yuki felt her body being carefully picked up and carried. Slowly she opened her eyes. What she saw horrified her. There, straight in her face, was an unknown man with blonde hair, his eyes in the shape of hearts. He was holding her bridal style, but his face seemed closer than where it was supposed to be. Reacting quickly to the situation, her hand came up, and with the palm she hit him across the face. He dropped her, and she fell, only to land on a bundle, cushioning her fall. She stood up after noticing it was a person with blue hair wrapped up in clothes. Looking around, she panicked. It looked like she was in the sea train, but why would she be in here? It was the night of the Aqua Laguna. She had to get to safety. Usopp, Sanji and Frankie could tell she was freaking out a little because she had the confused look on her face. Hey, calm down, Usopp told her, watching as she walked up and down the cart looking out the windows. Everything seemed to come all at once, because she dropped to her knees as she realized she had been kidnapped. Sanji swiftly went over to her. Hey, what's wrong? He tried to play it cool. I shouldn't be here, it's the night of the Aqua Laguna, she said. The Aqua Laguna shouldn't affect this train. It left earlier than it was supposed to, Frankie said. She seemed to calm down a little after the news. She walked over to the group of strangers with Sanji following behind her. Where's this train headed? She dared herself to ask. One of the last things she saw was the group of Marines at the train station. Eni's lobby. Frankie plainly answered. Eni's lobby? Why am I going there? I didn't do anything wrong, Yuki said. I didn't do anything wrong either. So why am I here? Usopp shouted. After a while of calming down, she got to know her cart buddies, or maybe even jail buddies. The guy with the blue hair in a funny style was Frankie, the famous Frankie in Water 6. The long-nosed one was Usopp, while the blonde one with curly eyebrows was his friend Sanji. After Sanji untied them all, they all went to the top of the cart. As the wind and rain came down on them, Yuki almost flew off if it wasn't for Sanji's quick catch. She saw him take out a Den Den Mushi which he stole from the inside of the train and called someone. A woman's voice could be heard on the other end. Yuki though didn't pay attention, because she saw Usopp almost fly off the train if it wasn't for Frankie who grabbed him and pulled him back down. Though soon after that Frankie almost went flying too. Yuki opened her mouth to say something, but upon closer look it made her laugh on the inside. While on the other side of the Den Den Mushi, the girl with dark blue hair pulled up into a pony watched as Luffy and Zoro come out from the train. She moved closer and up more on the red roof of the Frankie house but was careful not to be seen. The cannons that the Frankie family and the Galila workers were shooting did nothing to the large Aqua Laguna wave. As the two Straw Hat pirates readied their weapons, the wave came at them fast. She shut her eyes ready to go down with the train. She felt a blast. The hair in front of her face flew back somewhat. She looked up to see that they had created a large hole in the middle of the wave. Her mouth dropped open. She really should stop underestimating them. As the train went through, she wrapped her hands around the rooftop so she wouldn't fly off. At every bend and twist the train made, she could feel herself getting dizzier by the second. Shutting her eyes didn't help either. It made her feel like she was going to fall off. Still closing her eyes, she didn't notice or feel that they had gone through the wave until they heard the joyful shouts of the Frankie family and Galila company. Man, I think I almost had a heart attack, she muttered to herself. Yuki looked at Usopp when he said those words. I'm not going, he said, his back facing the group. You're going to join up with Luffy, right? After saying all that, I can't bow down enough to be with you? Yuki thought about the words he had said. She didn't get what they meant, but she felt that there was a fight going on between this Luffy person and Usopp. But just because of this one fight doesn't mean Usopp can't go save Robin, right? She thought back to her own small fight with Riku. There was no way she could be her sister, but if it really is true, if what she said was really true, then she missed her one chance to actually spend time with her, and to live with her. Now here she was going to Ini's lobby with no reason as to why. But seeing as they didn't leave her in Water 7 meant that something was going to happen to her, and it could lead to death. See ya. Usopp's soft whisper brought her back from her thoughts. As he started to walk away, she opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out, nothing but the howling wind. She wasn't in the same position as him, she couldn't tell him what to do. Then again she herself was in a tricky position. Yuki-san, Sanji said as he held a hand out for her. She grabbed it and was pulled to her feet. They started walking. Yuki looked back at Usopp, but he was already quite far. Leave him, Sanji said, and soon Frankie was walking behind them. After a while of walking, a marine opened a window and looked on the roof. I found them, he shouted, but was soon shot down. Who is it? Frankie and Sanji shouted, turning around along with Yuki. There they saw a man in a mask with a long nose. How many people in the world have long noses? Yuki thought. Let me join you, he exclaimed over the wind. My name is Sogeking. They all sat down in a circle on the roof cart as Sanji played out a plan. Where is Sharpshooter Island? Sogeking asked. Where is it? Yuki suddenly asked, interested. Robin could be in any of the 5 cars. Sanji kept talking about the plan. It's in your heart, Usopp told her. Really? In my heart? She then looked down to her heart amazed. Wow, I never knew. Few minutes later, okay, so that's the plan. Got it? Sanji clapped his hands together. Then Frankie and Sogeking nodded as they stood up with Sanji. Yuki slowly got up from her sitting position, and didn't move at all when Sanji, Usopp, and Frankie already started walking. Yuki-san, Sogeking looked back at her. When Sanji and Frankie heard the confusion in his voice, they turned back. Aren't you coming? Frankie asked, or more yelled over the rain. Yeah, but I was just thinking. Chances are highly like that I could die here, so I might as well give up now. But like Usopp-kun, I had a fight with a friend too, and for that person I can't. I have to get back alive. So I can apologize and see my sister, she said with a more determined look on her face. Haruhi. Be safe. I'm coming. Get out of the way, Frog. The shout barely making it to her ears, as she moved up higher on the roof of the Frankie family's house roof to take a look. There in front of the train, she saw a frog standing in the middle of the tracks. Everything was a blur. The frog knocked the train off the tracks, and the ship following behind with the Frankie house on it was detached. Noticing her situation, she took a leap towards the train that was moving farther and farther away from her with every second. Landing on top, she slipped and went tumbling across until she caught herself at the very edge. While Luffy was trying to hit the frog, the girl came up and pushed him aside. Damn frog. I almost died because of you. She then too tried to hit the frog but failed as he dodged all of her attacks, then hit her backwards. Luffy tried after she did and ended up with the same results. This whole cycle repeated for quite some time until an old lady called from the window. Who are you? Luffy asked her after they stared at the old lady talking to the frog for a while. Emmy? She asked, surprised and stupidly. Her cover had been blown. Yeah, you remind me of someone. He tilted his head and looked as if he was in deep thinking. I'm Yuya, Shinha Yuya, she quickly said after a moment of thought. Oh, I know, Riku. Riku flinched at her name. Who is this Riku you speak of? I'm Yuya. Yuya, she said carefully. Riku saw him concentrating really hard. Whatever, Yuya, Riku, Shinha, Yuya, doesn't matter. It does matter. Riku shouted at him. Straw Hat, I've just made a new nakama. The old lady from below yelled over the rain and wind. Yeah, I understand. I did too, he looked down from the edge. Oh, who? She asked curiously. Riku then walked over to the edge. This is, what's your name again? Luffy asked looking at her. Yuya. She shouted more fiercely, hitting him on the head at the same time. She then composed herself to a normal temper. Shinha Yuya, ma'am. She tilted her head a little downward as she introduced herself. Riku sat at the front of the train with Luffy, unwilling to go face Nami, Zoro, and Chopper, who could most likely recognize her instantly. Her disguise consisted of her dark brown hair dyed dark blue contacts, and different clothing of course. She wore white capris with 2 belts, a top that had a dark high neck, was sleeveless, and ended above the belly button. On top of the shirt there was something that closely resembled a breastplate but was made out of cloth and was a teal color. She believed it to be a pretty good disguise too, but some of the Straw Hats have sharp minds. "I found them," Luffy shouted, standing up next to Yokozuna. Riku looked up from where she was sitting and saw the rest of the Frankie family who weren't aboard the Rocket Man along with Usopp in a funny mask and Sanji. "Oi, Yuya. You should come in and meet everyone," Luffy shouted as he was about to climb into the window of the Rocket Man. "I'll be there soon," she replied, deeply in thought. Did she really want to go down there or risk getting her cover blown? Yeah, she really did. She had to know if Haruhi was down there with them. Even though she couldn't find her with the Frankie family packed in, she could have been somewhere in the crowd. If not, she had to know if Sanji had met her sister and if she was safe. She crawled into the window as Luffy and Chopper were amazed by Usopp, or better known as Sogeking now. Why would Usopp be undercover, she thought. Luffy noticed her staring. "Yuya, come and I'll introduce you to everybody." He waved her over. All the Straw Hats gathered, including some of the Frankie family and workers of the Galila Company. They blocked her view from the other end of the cart. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "All right everybody, this is Shinha Yuya, make sure you introduce yourself to her." Nami came forth first and stated her name. "Nami." After a pause she added, "Shinha, please don't lie to us if we ask you a question. Secrets are no fun, of course." She emphasized a few parts with a large smile. She knew. "I'm Chopper. You can rely on me if you need any medical attention." Riku looked towards the small reindeer with the red jacket. At least he didn't figure it out. The less, the better. "Zoro." He cracked an eye open and gave her the evil eye. Riku's shoulders stiffened, eyes wide. Did he recognize her? Think of her as an enemy? Would he tell Luffy? Her eyes started to swirl and she became dizzy. She lifted a hand to her head and stumbled across the floor slightly. "Shinha-san," Chopper called out, "are you okay?" "Yeah, just a little dizzy," she said quietly. "So, who's next?" "I am the great sniper." Sogeking, Usopp came from behind and shouted. Hi. Anyone else?" She quickly waved him off. "Ignored," Usopp whispered as he sulked in a corner. "I'm Polly from the Galila Company." The man she saw with Nami at the train station came up. She wondered what he was doing here. "I think that's enough for introductions." She nodded. "I could always get to know the rest of you later." She then walked past the Straw Hats, and looked at the other end of the cart. Her heart quickly sunk at the sight. No one was there except Sanji trying to light a wet cigarette. He noticed her staring at him and his personality changed. "Hello young miss. How may I help you?" He smiled at her and took her hand in his. With all her strength she squeezed his hand as hard as she could. "Ow!" He pulled his hand back. "Where is she?" Riku's dark blue bangs covered her eyes. Her voice changed into a deadly tone. Sanji looked up at her curiously. "Where is she?" She barked at him. "Where's my sister?" "Sister?" Sogeking repeated, and then it finally dawned on him and Sanji. "Yuki-san." The two shouted at the same time. "Wait, Robin. Don't go in there." Usopp's voice was heard from behind the door. "Robin-san." Yuki shouted as Robin opened the door to the second cart where CP9 was. Yuki looked past Robin, relieved to see that Sanji and Frankie were all right and they had made it okay. Out of nowhere, arms popped out and threw Usopp and Yuki into the middle of the second cart. "Robin, what are you doing?" Sanji was shocked and surprised at her actions. She stared at them and then spoke. Her words were cold and close to emotionless. "It seems that you people don't get it and words are meaningless to you." Yet there was something in her voice that very few could pick out. Usopp turned and shouted orders to Frankie, who quickly helped Yuki get up and ran her over to Sanji, who took a hold of her arm. "What are you planning on doing?" Sanji shouted to Usopp. Usopp spun his arm and shouted at the same time. He threw down something. Smoke star. Everything was enclosed with smoke while Sanji and Frankie ran to the back of the cart. They looked towards where Usopp disappeared to and saw him running towards them with Robin in hand. Yuki's face lit up. He did it, awesome, Frankie and Sanji cheered. They all took in large breaths as they watched the other cart ahead of them. Something felt oddly wrong. It seemed too easy, Sanji said. Just then, thorn whips came out and gripped the side of their cart. What? Yuki couldn't believe it. She thought they had a clean getaway. Cut the whip, Frankie shouted, but before anyone could make a move, the big guy, Bluno, pulled on the ropes, causing the cart to lurch forward and crash into the other. He then pulled the two carts together by hand. Sanji quickly composed himself and attacked Bluno. Tekai, he casually said as Sanji hit him in the chest. When that didn't work, Sanji used an even harder move. He took damage. Just as Sanji was about to land another blow, he heard Robin's voice. Clutch, Frankie, Yuki, and Sanji turned to see Usopp caught in Robin's move. Robin-san. What are you doing? Yuki screamed. She couldn't really handle or hold in much of her frustration anymore. Stay out of my business, Robin plainly stated. The other guy with a long nose came over quickly and kicked Sanji across the cart. You guys are all stubborn when it comes to comrades. Frankie walked over to the wall and pushed on it with his head. Here's your chance to escape. He and the wall went forward and into the other cart. Frankie, Yuki and Sanji yelled across the rolling waves. Robin ran to the end of the cart. I'm not trying to run away, she too yelled to him. How can you say that, Robin? Even after we came to rescue you, why can't you just come back? Even if we are attacked by the Buster Call we can manage. Sanji didn't get it. He tried to persuade Robin into coming back. Sanji, behind you, Yuki shrieked. He didn't turn fast enough and was kicked, yet blood was spilt. Bluno then grabbed Robin. Usopp tried to stop him, but was stabbed by his finger. Yuki sat there in horror, she was in shock. Robin, Usopp was gasping for breath. You can't leave a crew without the captain's permission, so have faith in Luffy. After those words had left his mouth, he was hit in the face. Yuki was snapped out of her phase, though she zoned out the shouting of Sanji, and caught snips of Robin's past, but she was more focused on the words that Usopp had said. Have faith, she had always believed that her sister was alive. But the way her sister was shot in front of her, it never seemed possible. The nightmares had haunted her, they never allowed her to believe, have hope or faith. It's all for the sake of justice, Bluno had said as he was about to step through door. Yuki had stood up, her eyes full of rage, yet set with determination. She charged towards him, fast. A vaguely familiar rush had filled her, and before the door had closed, she had jumped him. Time seemed to slow as she thought back on the past events. These people's words of justice. Robin hurting and neglecting to be with her friends. Riku insisting that she's her dead sister, and her real sister being taken away. They all came crashing to her. The frustration and stress that had built up was all to be released as she punched him straight in the face. He had no time to use his Tekai, because he never saw or thought she was to attack. And with that, she had disappeared into the closed door. No one could tell what Riku was thinking. His eyes were closed, but she made no facial expression. They could tell she was thinking, but of what? They all sat silently. Usopp and Sanji's eyes casted down to the floor, they felt guilt creep upon their backs, making its way to their throat. As Riku's eyes were closed, she felt the walls closing in on herself. It seemed that everything in her body had shut down except for her mind. Why would Haruhi do that? She doesn't know Sanji, Frankie and Usopp that well, or Robin. She had never had a sister before, and even if she did, she couldn't remember. She thought back to her past, yet she could only go so far. She could only go back to when she first woke up on the operating table. Pain feeding on her from every corner. She opened her eyes only to find herself being surrounded by strangers with pure white masks on, as well as stained, bloodied operating gloves. The metallic taste in her mouth as well as the stench lingered in her nose. Riku had quickly pushed the thought away. It's a horrific scene for a 10-year-old girl to wake up to and still have nightmares of it to this day. Riku inhaled slowly and had opened her eyes. She looked to Sanji and Usopp, who had the regretful look on their faces. She could see Sanji's fist curled up close to him. She breathed out her words softly. Please, can you tell me more about Yuki-san? As the two looked up, they met Riku's eyes. They pondered on what that meant. Was she mad at them? Furious? Did she pity them? No, it was something else. They caught a hint in her eyes that it was neither. Yet, Usopp found something different. Aren't you her sister? Now that you mention it, Shouldn't you know more about her than Sanji and Usopp? Nami asked. But, Nami, Usopp isn't here. Chopper told the navigator, who just sighed with a little bit of frustration. Riku's face slightly tinged red out of embarrassment of her stupidity. I never got to know her that well. Usopp was gone for 7 years, I don't even know if she remembers me. It was a lie, yet it was the truth. Haruhi's sister had died, that was all the proof needed that Haruhi wouldn't acknowledge her as her real sister. No, I don't think that's the case. Sanji had finally gotten a moment to speak. Riku was surprised at the words he had said. While I was on the sea train, she had nearly given up. But then she told us that she can't, because she needs to apologize to her sister. His words had shocked her. A smile had come upon her face and she chuckled a little, which soon turned out to become a full-blown laugh. Sanji and Usopp's guilt-stricken face had slowly turned into a smile, as well as most of the group aboard. Mostly the Straw Hats. As her laughter had died down, she wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Everyone listened to what she was going to say next. She looked straight at the crew. So tell me, what's the plan for getting in and out of Enies lobby alive? Only 4 minutes left until we go in, Kokura had stated. Yuya hummed as she sharpened an arrow tip. Nami was checking on her Klima tact, Sanji was smoking and Chopper was watching Usopp, Sogeking. Zoro was just standing and getting ready to infiltrate. Luffy had run ahead of the group and was already on his way to save Robin. The plan was to open the first gate before going in. Though, he apparently couldn't sit still that long enough and had gone ahead. The clock ticked down. For those inside the first gate, everything was going by fast. Yet for those on the Rocket Man, it went by slowly. By the time 5 minutes had passed, Kokura turned the train around and was headed towards Enies lobby. Guys, it seems there's a change to our plans. Hang on to something. Everyone's head lifted at the sound of Kokura's announcement. Sanji opened up the window and shouted to Zoro, who was sitting at the head of the train. Hey, stupid swordsman. What's going on? The main gate had been closed. He simply answered. It was a surprise that he didn't have to shout for his answer to reach Sanji. What did you say? Somehow Zoro's voice had carried, and Nami, Usopp, Chopper, and Yuya aka Riku had also heard what he said. We're going to crash, Usopp yelled out the obvious. Chopper panicked while running around the train. What should we do? We can't dodge it, Kokura. Turn the train around, Nami screamed her head off. Riku had sighed, but on the inside she too was terrified of what was going to happen to them. She had a feeling they were going to die and accidentally voiced her opinion out loud. We're going to die. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at her. A second later, chaos ensued with Nami, Usopp and Chopper. Don't worry. There's a way. Even though no one could see him, he stood up. Riku ran over to the window, wondering how everything would work out. Frog, push down that fence, Zoro ordered. Wait, but if you do that we'll… Riku's shout was cut off as she was sent sprawling backwards from the train, lurching up and forwards. Rocketman was sent flying up and over the gates. Zoro, did you ever consider how we're going to land? The fuming Nami exclaimed as she was leaning out the window. Silence had enveloped before he answered. Leave it to luck. Leave it to luck, my bee. After regaining her balancing, Riku was hit down again by Chopper, who was being thrown around inside the train. The train had hit a giant and landed. Unknownly, luck had really been on their side and everyone was okay. Zoro was already standing and ready to go, as well as Sanji. Usopp lay under the train with Chopper ready to treat any wounds. Pirates are still inside the train. Blow them to pieces. A soldier had shouted after he saw Chopper and Usopp near the train. Wait. Nami still in the… Sanji tried to stop them, but either way, it would have been pointless. They shot the bazooka-type gun. They had ceased fire when another soldier saw a figure in the smoke. It was Kokura, Chimney and Ganbei. Stop, I'm just an old lady. And I'm just kid with a small pet. The Strafots forced us to pilot the train, Kokura said in a kind of slurred way. Can there be a drunken hostage? Asked one of the Frankie family members. The soldiers were worrying that they almost killed hostages, that they almost didn't notice the cloud that was above the train, but waited dark and closed the ground. Nami managed to make it out of the train with Riku. She was creating the cloud with her perfect Klima tact and Riku watching her back. Thunderbolt tempo. Just as she threw in her thunder, Riku remembered something. "Nami, isn't it dangerous to be in the middle?" she asked the navigator. "Actually yeah, it's really dangerous." Right then a crack had sounded and a bolt had appeared right next to them. "Ah!" The two shouted and ran for cover. Nami ended up running to Usopp and hitting him on the head for making such a dangerous weapon. "Damn it, Nami! You hit us too." Zoro was angry and burnt as he shouted at Nami. "You reminded me of how we first met." Sanji seemed somehow happy about it. Riku's sweat dropped. This is going to be a long day. How in God's name did I get separated from them? Riku thought about for a while until she remembered. Oh yeah, now I remember. She rolled her eyes. Currently she was traveling through the corridors finding her way to the roof. When they had made it to the courthouse they were attacked by guys that seemed attached together. They ended up leaving it up to the Frankie family to fight them. When no one was looking, Zoro ended up taking a wrong turn. Sanji had already run ahead of the group, and somehow, she too had gotten lost. She stopped in her tracks and racked through her brain for some help. Well, let's see. Our main goal was to get to loose Straw Hat who was last seen on the roof. So I'm guessing that's where everyone else is going to head. Making sure her bow was still on her, she bent down. There's one of the pirates, get her. The shout came from one end of the hallway, yet there were footsteps on both ends. She stood up with her hands still on her feet and squat back down, almost as if she was stretching. 1, 2, 3, on her third squat, she jumped and punched the ceiling. Success. Ah. Forgetting she was in midair she started to fall. She was caught by Chopper who just happened to be on the floor above hers. Are you okay, Yuya? He asked as he set her down. Oh, yeah, haha, thanks there. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Now's not really the time to be laughing, Nami said rushed, her eyes still on the large men before them. Nami. Chopper. Get back. Riku ordered. But before the guys could even attack they were blown upwards by an unknown force. Riku scratched her head. Well, I guess that works out. After her words had ended the ground underneath them had cracked. What's downstairs? Nami had shouted as they too were being pulled upwards. The ceiling above them had broken and the sunlight could be seen. What the fu? Riku had shouted as they were heading up. As gravity started taking over, they fell. Nami had managed to land off to the side, as well as Riku. Sadly, Chopper had hit fallen face first. Riku had turned back to the large hole as a hand came out and grabbed the edge. The figure that pulled himself out was no other than Zoro. Zoro? Nami was also surprised to see him. The sound of cement breaking could be heard near the group that had just erupted from the building. Sanji broke through the ground with a kick. I'm definitely the first one here. Robin-chan. I'm her. He stopped his speech when he saw Zoro sitting across from him. Glaring daggers he began to yell at Zoro and Zoro shouted back. Riku watched with slight amusements before her eyes caught onto something. Guys? Chopper also seemed to spot it. Sogeking, everyone looked up wondering why he was doing whatever he was doing, why he was flying, and if he could land safely. Riku winced at his landing. She turned her head at the sound of Luffy's shouting his beg to Robin. Straw Hat, to think you would go as far as invade Eni's lobby for your comrades. She then turned her head to the raven-haired women, who refused to be rescued. Nico Robin. You are the last survivor of Ohara. The only person in this world who could probably read poneglyphs. Is this really what you want, to die for your friends, no matter how far out they reach to you? Riku shook her head. This wasn't her business to be getting into. She shouldn't even be sticking her nose into this. Her main reason for coming here was for Yuki, she almost forgot. Yuya? Riku was knocked out of her thoughts as her fake name was called. It was Nami. She and everyone else stood at the edge of the building. Luffy's speech seemed to be over, for now. Zoro was informing his about the drawbridge being lowered. Yuya. What are you doing down there? It doesn't look too cool when you're down there alone. Riku had shaken her head. No, I'm okay. This is your guys' time to shine a knot here for Robin-san. Yuya. This is a rescue mission. We're all here to rescue Robin. Luffy had overheard them and shouted at her. Riku got irritated at the captain that had already caused so much trouble for them. I'm not part of your crew. We're all here to save Robin and your sister, he had announced proudly. Before Riku retorted back, she thought about his words. Did he really mean it? Were they all going to help her get Yuki back? I think he's trying to say we're all in the same boat here. Nami explained as she held out her claim attack. Riku hesitated slightly before taking a hold of it. She was then pulled up onto the same bordered edge that Nami and Zoro were standing on. It didn't look even with 2 people on each, and one with 3 people, so she jumped to the one next to Nami. Wahahaha. The man with the mask laughed. Do you realize that no matter how brave you are, nothing changes? We have CP9, the Gates of Justice, and the Golden Den Den Mushi to trigger Buster Call. As if just to prove his point, he held up the Den Den Mushi. Everyone could see that Robin visibly flinched. Riku's anger started to rise. There was something irritating about the man. He thought of himself better and higher than everyone, like he had all the power in the world. That's right, exactly 20 years ago, it had obliterated your hometown. Riku held up her sharpest arrow. A vein could be seen clearly. Can I run him through? She asked in a low, aggravated voice. She was slightly satisfied when she saw him back up towards the CP9 and shiver. He held up the Golden Den Den Mushi and placed his finger over the button. Stop, don't do that, Robin shouted at him. An arrogant smile found its way to his face. Does that mean I should press it? Now, Riku didn't want to interrupt Robin's argument going on, and right now couldn't keep her cool like the Straw Hats. But then again, she wasn't a pirate. She was a marine, who saw justice in her own way. And this wasn't justice. Are you stupid? She yelled. Stop means to not move, and don't do that means to not do whatever you're going to do, she shouted at him. Though she was quite happy when she heard a snicker come from Luffy, and to see smiles on the rest of the Straw Hats' faces. I should press it just to get rid of you, he threatened her. Apparently Robin was about to lose it also. Do you know what will happen when you press it? She practically screamed. He laughed as he said his next words. Of course. You pirates will have a 0 chance of getting off this island. Or did you have something else in mind? He laughed again and again, mocking her. His fingers still hovering over the button of destruction. It's not that simple. You said Ohara disappeared from the map, didn't you? Can you see any humans on that map? You could only be so cruel because you look at the world like that? Robin had fallen to her knees. You could see her shudder at the thought of the Buster Call. Her mind seemed to wander elsewhere as she remembered those horrifying memories of her homeland bursting into flames. If you commence the Buster Call right now, Eni's lobby will be destroyed along with all of us in it, she came back from her reminiscing. That's insane, he shouted, not believing a single word. Our own people won't be killed. It's not insane, it's true, Riku had yelled without meaning to. Everyone had turned to her with a questioning look. Robin has actually experienced the Buster Call unlike you, so she would of course know more. Robin had given a slight nod that no one had noticed and spoke again. Phew. Close one. I almost gave away my position as a marine. Truth was that I actually came across some articles on the Buster Call on Ohara, while studying at Marineford. The attack is now targeted at my true friends, the only ones I've ever placed faith in. The longer I stay with them, the more I betray and endanger them. Wherever I go in this world, I will always have enemies destined to destroy me. On most of the Straw Hats' face was anger. Riku could not come to an expression. Her feelings were mixed. Though there was one thing she was quite sure of. Robin has had it much tougher than her. She had woken up on an operating table with no memories of herself before that. Robin had watched as her home island was destroyed as well as her mother and had grown up alone. Riku had Garp to help her, as well as Chaki and many others she has met. Her kidnapping was just the turning point of her life. If I ever want to die, then I'll wish for it to be right here and now, Robin had shouted to them. Riku had her eyes shut in thought and had opened when these words had left Robin's mouth. This is a harsh punishment. She shouldn't even be accepting it, rather she should fight back. The man with the mask had laughed his most annoying laugh. It's so stupid for anyone to lug you around all the time. Take a look at that flag, pirates. It bears the symbol representing the pact between 170 nations. It is the world. That's right, I forgot about it, the world government. You have no idea how great a federation this woman is being trailed by. Finally, for the first time in the longest minutes Riku had faced, Luffy had spoken. I do know who Robin's enemies really are. Sogeking. He called for Usopp, who had turned his head towards the captain on command. "I want you to burn that flag down." Roger. Not only was Spandam surprised, but Riku as well. She had the large look that clearly showed it, and even turned her head towards Luffy to see if he was serious. Fire Bird Star. Usopp had shouted his new move as flames in the shape of a bird had flown through the air, engulfing the flag. The mouth that had been of shock then slowly turned into a small smile. "I guess there's no helping it, he really is crazy, yet brave," Riku had whispered to herself. She looked to Robin, whose shocked face looked up at the flag, her face slowly wavering. She heard the shouts of disbelief from the soldiers below. "The pirates have now waged war against the world government. You're all crazy. Do you think you can really stand a chance against the world?" Spandam screamed. Luffy had breathed in deeply and shouted one word back, "Yeah." Robin's tears had slowly started to fall, as the look of shock had finally faded. "Robin, I haven't heard you say it yet. Say that you want to live." Not only Robin's expression had changed but everyone else's. Their expression from mostly nothing to hopeful. Her tears became larger with each breath as she shook. In one large breath she had said the words everyone was waiting for. "I want to live. Take me with you to the blue seas." Riku couldn't help but smile. Even if they were pirates, their friendship goes all the way. She even chuckled when she saw Frankie break down into tears. Chopper had caught the large movement from below. The drawbridge is lowering. Riku had looked down, and it was very much true. When she looked back up, she couldn't help but notice two other people she never noticed before. They were in the way back of the building, still on the inside, and were apparently watching the events unfold. There was one who was facing them. She had black hair pulled up into two very high pigtails and the tips were dyed pink. Her eyes were a magenta color and she had a nasty look on her face as she yelled at the other girl whose back was towards them. Yet Riku recognized the long, light brown hair. It was Haruhi Yuki. Her hands were tied behind her as she argued with the pigtailed one. "Yuki!" Riku had yelled so she could hear her. Haruhi had turned at the sound of her name, and her face could be seen clearly. It was without a doubt her. She swiftly lifted the bow from around her and nocked an arrow. Bending her knees, she leaned back, bringing the string and arrow with her. Aiming it at the pigtailed girl, she let go and let it whistle through the air. But the girl saw it coming, grabbed Yuki, dodged, and ran. The arrow lodged itself into the wall where her head would have been. They made it to and couldn't be seen anymore. Riku made tch sound as she turned and looked back at Luffy, who nodded at her. He cracked his knuckles and smiled. Riku had nocked another arrow, preparing for battle. "Here we come. Getting ready for battle." Khalifa turned to the sound of her door creaking open. She loosened her stance as she saw that it was one of her most loyal followers. "Kanan," she let out in a breath. "I thought you were one of the pirates. I'm expecting some this way." The girl had crouched into a bow. "I apologize, Khalifa-sama. Shall I interrupt their attack on you?" She looked up hopeful. Khalifa had shaken her head. "That will not be necessary. We still need you to watch the girl. They will probably be after her as well." Kanan had bowed her head to hide the displeasured look on her face. "Yes, Khalifa-sama." She stood up and walked out the door. A few moments after she had left, Sanji had walked through the door. Everyone had gone their separate ways looking for the keys to free Robin. Riku too had joined in and at the same time, was desperately looking for Yuki. Worried about her sister, she ran through the halls. She had slowed to a stop though, for standing clearly in her way was Haruhi, who stood staring at the door next to her. As Riku called out, she turned her head. "Yuki-san." Riku started walking towards her, eyes wide with disbelief. Haruhi looked confused as she looked at Riku, though Riku remembered that she was in disguise. "It's me, Riku." "Riku?" Haruhi questioned the name, but the voice did sound like Riku. As she looked closer she could see the image of Riku excluding the dark blue hair and eyes. While walking, Riku had stopped in the middle of her tracks. Something was odd. "How'd you get away?" Preparing for a trap, she took a few steps backwards. Haruhi had seen this and brought her hands up in attempt to calm her. "Oh, well you see, you better not try anything while I'm gone. Got it?" Kanan told her fiercely. "If you do, I won't hesitate to attack you." She lifted her nose in the air. "Can you tell me again why I'm here?" Haruhi asked, clueless to the fact that she was being threatened. Kanan looked ready to pull her hair out. What? Did those pirates brainwash you or something? We were told by headquarters to find you and take you back. And with that she left Yuki standing in the hallway outside of Khalifa's room as she went to check on Khalifa herself inside. I need to go to the bathroom. Haruhi had mumbled under her breath, and she walked off in a random direction. As anyone would guess, as it was Yuki's first time here and she got no tour of the place, she got lost. So as one of the guards came running past her to go and fight the pirates that were invading, she stopped him in his tracks. Could you tell me where the bathroom is? She asked politely. For a second he looked her up and down deciding who she was and what to do, though at the same time he couldn't help but blush at her. She tilted her head and looked at him questioningly. Straight forward and 6th door to your left, he answered quickly. Thank you. She smiled at him and walked away. He stood staring at her figure before he got a call on a small den mushi to get moving. After she was done she walked back to Khalifa's room. By the time she got back to the front of the door though, she could hear fighting going on inside and Khalifa's voice as well as another, though it wasn't Kanan's. She decided to wait and stood outside the door not wanting to intrude. A few minutes later, she heard her name and saw Riku not far down the hall. Riku didn't really want to believe the story, but it seemed true enough for Haruhi. Well, whatever, I need to get you out of here. We're kind of in a dangerous position on this island. She walked forward closing the distance and reached for Haruhi's arm. Riku's hand was cut as Haruhi was pushed backwards. Before any more damage could be done, Riku jumped back. Standing in the middle of the siblings was the girl Riku had seen earlier with black hair and high pigtails, with tips dyed pink and fierce magenta eyes. She wore a small black dress with no sleeves, fishnet shirt and leggings, as well as black high heels and a necktie. Something to match Khalifa's clothes. Who are you? Riku asked as she held her bow at ready. Kanan arrogantly raised her head. I'm Kanan, CP9 substitute and Khalifa Sama's loyal follower. She grinned. Who are you? None of your business. All I came here to do was bring Yuki back to Water 7, Riku had simply said. Kanan had moved and attacked Riku. And all I came here for was to be praised by Khalifa. But we don't always get what we want. Riku had lost sight of her, and in the small fraction of time saw her behind her. Riku dodged but was cut in the cheek. Instead, I'm stuck babysitting. Weird. Riku thought. Kanan had no weapons on her, and her nails weren't sharp, so how could she have gotten cut? Seeing as Kanan was the CP9 substitute, she knew some of the moves but probably hasn't mastered them yet. Riku could tell that for sure. Riku shot an arrow at the standing Kanan, who dodged with Soru. Coming up from the right, she cut Riku's right arm. The blood splattered across the floor in a vertical line. Riku fell to her knees holding her injured arm as Kanan had smiled, walking closer for the finishing blow. Struggling to stand, she had made it and jumped backwards just in time. As her feet skidded across the floor, she didn't see Kanan disappear from her original spot and found her next to her one moment and gone the next. Riku's two legs were cut before they came to a stop. Her legs gave in. Shit. She looked down at her bleeding legs which could no longer hold her up. She then looked up to see Haruhi's worried face running towards her. Stay back, Riku had warned, but she didn't listen and just kept running. Haruhi bent down next to Riku, checking if she was alright. Kanan couldn't help but laugh at the pitiful sight. As Kanan stepped closer, Haruhi looked up and glared at the woman who caused Riku pain. What's this? The little mouse is going to try and fight back. Kanan had thrown her head back and laughed. That was when Riku noticed it. Blood splatter was flicked downward, and when Riku searched for the source, it was on Kanan's pigtails. Her pink tips dyed red in Riku's blood. Kanan stopped laughing as she sensed Riku's gaze on her. Well, finally figure it out? Riku made no move to answer. I guess I'll just come right out and say it since you're probably going to end up dying. At the Kani no am I. Kani? Riku questioned after a moment. Her eyes widened. How could she not see it before? That girl was a devil fruit user. Looking closer, Kanan's pigtails were in the shape of a crab's claw. Kanan activated her devil fruit and the pigtails had turned into real claws and Kanan came charging forwards. Noticing the situation, Riku had moved her weight and pushed Haruhi out of the way, shutting her eyes and waiting for the pain of tearing skin and flesh. Though it never came. When Riku had looked up, she saw Haruhi, standing there with Riku's bow in the position to shoot. Yet there was no arrow. Haruhi had lowered the bow a little as Riku looked over to where Kanan was, stopped in her tracks by a single arrow lodged deeply into the ground in front of her. Dust had collected in the air around her. "I don't like fighting, but I can't let you hurt my Imoto," Haruhi had shouted as she swiftly and elegantly pulled out another arrow and knocked it on the bow. Riku stared up at Haruhi in awe. Though the emotion faded and was replaced by happiness, she could feel her eyes water, but never let a single drop fall. Haruhi was the family she's ever wanted. Pushing herself off the ground, she put up with the pain throbbing in her legs and arm. Haruhi had seen Riku trying to stand up from the corner of her eye. "Don't stand up." As Haruhi rushed over to Riku, Kanan took this opportunity and used Soru. Amazingly though, Haruhi saw what was coming next and quickly leapt out of the way with Riku. As soon as Haruhi let go of Riku's arm, she quickly shot an arrow. The arrow was faster and more powerful than Riku's, and it had caught Kanan off guard, catching her left side, then her. Haruhi jumped in front of Riku had started battling with Kanan. Their powers almost evenly matched, yet there could only be one winner. Haruhi's arrows were powerful, yet Kanan was agile. She could dodge some of Haruhi's moves, yet would still get caught by some. And when Kanan came in for attack, Yuki had no time to put an arrow in her face and had to dodge before shooting another arrow. "I need to help Haruhi somehow." Riku looked down to her bleeding legs. "But, with these wounds, I'll only get in the way." Shifting her legs, she felt something in one of the lower pockets. "Ah, I almost forgot I had these." Immediately she pulled out bandages she had gotten from Gaia, as well as some medicine. As she splattered the medicine onto her wounds, she couldn't help but wince as it stung. She wrapped her legs as tightly as possible so she could no longer feel the pain, and as she stood up, all she could feel was a numb feeling. An effect of the medicine. Riku would run off to help her sister right about now, but there was still one obstacle she needed to get over. She herself could not keep up with Kanan's speed. As Riku watched the battle, she couldn't tell which direction Kanan was coming from to attack Haruhi. "Just breathe, in, out, it's just your nerves. You had found Haruhi, you were ready to protect her, but Kanan's devil fruit got the better of you, focus." Riku had taken deep breaths with her eyes closed. She slowly started opening them as her mind became focused. Her eyes locked on an object as they were opening. Just in front of her, coming at high speed, was an arrow. She panicked and ducked. "Hey, Haruhi. Watch was you're shooting," she shouted. Sorry. She was right in front of me and jumped out of the way." Haruhi jogged over to where Riku was, checking if her sister had any injuries from her. "Whatever," Riku mumbled. Yeah, she had a nice and cool sister, but she was a clumsy one. "Anyway, we have bigger problems to deal with." Riku looked to Kanan. "Oh, are you talking about me?" Kanan said in her most innocent voice. "Damn right I'm talking about you." Riku stomped her foot and waved her fist. Kanan smirked and disappeared on them. "Riku," Haruhi said her name. A plan going through her mind as well as through Riku's. "Yeah." She nodded her head and they went back to back. Riku had her fists up and ready, while Haruhi had her bow up with an arrow knocked. They waited for the attack, and Haruhi had finally sensed it first. "She's on your side." Just as Haruhi had said that, Kanan had appeared before Riku. And Riku, who was finally focused, punched Kanan straight in the face. She had flown down the hallway, with a large bruise on her cheek. While Kanan was on the ground, Riku and Haruhi could hear mumbling coming from her. "Khalifa-sama will be disappointed in me. I let her get away. I let her beat me, Khalifa-sama. She went with the pirates. Khalifa-sama shall not praise me. Khalifa-sama. Khalifa-sama." Kanan stood up angry and furious. "Why you? I'll kill you." Not only her had become pincers, but her hands as well. She had charged towards the two sisters. "Bring it!" Riku yelled. Kanan looked up as Riku came down with a punch to her head, her hands busy fighting with Haruhi for the bow. As Riku came down, her pigtail claws snapped at her. The punch went straight into the hair claws, cutting skin deeply and gripping her wrists. Like it had a mind of its own, it threw her into the hallway wall, breaking it. The sun blinded Kanan for a second, but it was more than enough time for Haruhi to jump out through the broken wall to see if her sister was okay. Riku had landed very close to the edge of the land that held up the judicial tower. A few more inches and she would have fallen into the endless pit of the unknown. Kanan had jumped out and followed them. While Haruhi was helping Riku up, Kanan had soared in between them and hit them both in the stomach with her pincers. For Haruhi, she was hit with the blunt end while Riku was actually stabbed through skin. Haruhi had doubled over, clutching her stomach in pain. Quickly composing herself, Riku had swung a punch towards Kanan, who had casually sidestepped it. She brought her leg up and kicked Riku down. She stumbled forwards, not wanting to fall to her knees. They were all fatigued, bruised, and cut. Kanan wanted to end this. She uppercut Riku, who was hit backwards and skid across the grass, her head stopping over the edge. Kanan walked towards her, and then gaining speed, she rushed towards Riku and jumped into the air. Her claws aimed downwards towards Riku's throat. Haruhi was up and ready when she saw this. Pulling out a fan from her pocket, she threw it towards the flying figure. Kanan had easily batted it away with her pincers. As she turned her head back towards Riku on the ground, her wrists were grabbed. She was met face to face with Riku. When Kanan had hit the fan away, Riku had jumped up and met her in midair. Riku held Kanan's arms up and together with one hand so that she couldn't use them. As Kanan kicked her feet at Riku, she grabbed the ankle with her other hand. As they were falling, Riku repositioned herself. Then lifting her leg in the small area between her and Kanan, she brought all her weight down onto Kanan's stomach, sending her to the ground. Riku fell, landing on Kanan, who was about to get up, knocking her unconscious. She rolled over to double-check her work. Haruhi tiredly went over to Riku. She fell over across from her. I had wished to have ended cooler, Riku. We need to get going. Haruhi had managed the words with her hasty breaths. Silence enveloped the two, and the only thing that could be heard was their ragged breathing. Finally, Riku spoke. 5 more minutes, Oni-san. Riku couldn't help but add the Oni-san at the end, but was too tired to take it back. Haruhi had smiled lightly at the thought of being called Oni-san again. Fine, they both rested, for their bodies were useless with the amount of energy they had left. Sleeping longer than intended, Riku awoke to the sound of an announcement going on. Damn it! I screwed up. This is the baby Den Den Mushi. The voice had screamed. Riku struggled to listen, yet her head was pounding as if she had a drinking contest versus Roronoa Zoro. Yet she managed to catch the most important words out of the annoying masked man's screams. Worst of all, I triggered the buster call. Riku's eyes couldn't help but widen. She shot up into a sitting position and painfully whipped her head around to Haruhi, who was still in deep sleep. She needed to get Haruhi off this island as soon as possible. Riku rushed to wake up her sister, but her hand had stopped in midair above Haruhi's shoulder. What have you done? Cancel it immediately, Robin's voice had struck her. She needed to help get Robin back. Then again, she was a Marine, and Robin was a wanted woman. Ah man. Not this argument again. Riku mentally screamed and battled it out. A light bulb finally went off in her head. I'm a Marine who sees to it that justice should be served. I also can see justice my own way, and that is the way I shall follow. Robin has never done anything bad. Yeah, she can read poneglyphs, but that's the fucking government's problem. If they don't want anyone reading poneglyphs, they could just destroy all poneglyphs. Yet they want the frickin' ancient weapons for reasons unknown to the common Marines. Okay, I've decided. Riku had the determined look on her face. I'm going to get Haruhi out of here while at the same time helping Robin. She nodded to herself at this awesome plan. Now I need to get back in the building and find the keys. Riku looked up at the tall building of the judicial tower. Her mouth dropped open at the sight. The tower had been cut and the top half had slid down a little. What? Riku. Haruhi was up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. LLOO? Riku had quickly composed herself, for she didn't want to be seen as a wreck. What do we do now? She had stood up and swung Riku's bow around her torso. She walked towards Riku, not noticing the shadow that covered them from the top half of the tower. Well, we need to get you out of here, Riku simply said. Haruhi had shaken her head, confusing Riku. I'm going to help save Robin-san. She looked into her sister's eyes with fierce determination. But the buster call has been activated, and we need to get out of here, Riku argued, yet she changed her words to we, rather than you, in hopes of getting her to go. You plan on staying here, don't you? Haruhi was sharp. She watched how Riku stood on the roof with the pirate crew. Her, defending Robin from Spandam's accusing. And her smile at the end, when Robin had shouted her beautifully said words to her friends. Haruhi stood up, and walked past Riku. "You'll need someone to watch your back, Imoto." Riku turned around and saw Haruhi winked at her along with a smile. She turned and started walking again. Though Haruhi only saw the surprised look on Riku's face when she turned back to walking. She could hear the running footsteps in the grass to catch up to her. When she turned to her right, she could see a giant smile plastered to Riku's face as she walked next to her. "By the way, you alright? The fall from the building was a little high." Haruhi looked over at the somewhat limping sister. "Yeah, falling from the 6th story onto your back is the greatest feeling in the world." Riku rolled her eyes as she said it sarcastically. "How about you? I thought you would have broken a bone or two jumping out of there." "Boo!" A large sound rumbled through them as they walked. Haruhi looked down a little disturbed. "Man, I knew I was hungry, but not that hungry." "Oni-san, I don't think that was your stomach." Riku sighed at her sister. A few seconds had passed and the sound of splashing could be heard. They rounded the building in time to find Frankie diving into the water. "Frankie!" Haruhi shouted, worried that he fell in. Though to her relief he came, hacking up water with a cute little reindeer, who was passed out unconscious and looked as if he were dead. This time it was Riku's turn to be worried. "He's back to normal," Frankie heaved out. Chopper," she choked on his name from the shock of seeing the doctor like that. He looked up at the sound of her voice and saw Haruhi. "Yuki-san. And, who are you?" He looked to the blue-haired girl. "Chopper," she shouted again running over to him. "What happened?" Frankie looked at her confused then turned to Haruhi who mouthed the words sister. He sighed and scratched the back of his head explaining what happened from the beginning. How Chopper so badly wanted to save Robin that he went rampaging monster on them and how he and Nami came up with a plan. "We just need to get to the gates of justice now," he concluded. "Hey, Frankie." A voice could be heard not too far. Everyone turned their heads to find a little girl waving her hands at them. It was Chimney and Ganbei. She walked over to them. "We know how to get to the gates of justice and are here to guide you," she announced proudly. Riku carefully picked up crossing so she could be a part of the conversation. "Chimney, can't you just tell us?" She then looked down at Chopper and how fragile and broken he looked. "Oni-san. Can you hold him for me, please?" She handed him off to Haruhi, who gingerly took him. She couldn't help but blush at the contact to his soft fur and cuteness. Without the blood and bruises, of course. "Do you think we'll make it?" Frankie asked as they ran. In the end, the group of 3 ran ahead and left Kokura, Chimney, and Ganbei with Chopper. "Most likely. At the pace we're going and if Robin-san is fighting back, then yeah. I think we should make it," Riku answered back. "What about the other keys though?" Haruhi had questioned. "We'll just have to hope that it's either keys 3 or 4. Riku's pace started to slow as she could feel the numbing of her wounds starting to fade. Her breathing became ragged and harsh. The large wound from Kanan in her stomach had started bleeding some more. The bandages had already been soaked. Frankie stopped and turned around as Haruhi pulled out more bandages. "Hey, is she alright?" he asked as he started walking back towards them. "Keep going. We'll catch up with you soon enough," Riku had yelled when she saw him walking back towards them. He paused for a while then nodded in understanding before running off again. Riku pulled off her red bandages and had Haruhi wrap new ones around. "That should stop the bleeding, right?" Riku asked. "No," Haruhi said as the bandages started going red again. She was more focused on the bottles of medicine Riku had with her. "Here." She handed her one of the bottles. "Drink all the contents in this bottle. This one should stop the bleeding." Riku took the bottle shaking and curiously. "And you know this how?" "And you don't? It's your medicine, right?" Riku chuckled and rubbed the back of her head. "Ahaha. Well, I only asked Gaia which one numbs the pain. I didn't really care for the other bottles she gave me." Riku then drank the contents of the bottle. "Speaking of which, I forgot to put the pain medicine on the wound. If you put too much of that on, you might face after effects." Haruhi looked through the other bottles. "Take 2 of these. It has the same effect, just less." She threw Riku another bottle. Opening the bottle, she looked inside to find that they were pills instead. She took 2 out and swallowed them, choking a few times before managing to get it down her throat. Blah. She stuck her tongue out in disgust. I better not become a druggie after this is over. Riku had skidded to a stop as she saw Luffy go flying into a nearby wall. Straw Hat. Haruhi looked to the boy Riku had shouted at. He looked familiar in some way. She placed her hand under her chin and thought. She saw him flying through the air towards Riku at the Mizu Mizu Cafe, yet there was something else. She's seen him somewhere else, perhaps, in the past. She raked her mind through her childhood, though was pulled out at the call of her name. Yuki-san, Blue Girl. Frankie was running towards the door at the other end and had called out to them. A tick mark had appeared on Riku's head. I have a name. He ignored her and kept running. Just as he was about to make it, he was attacked by one of the CP9. The one Riku recognized as the Galilo worker, Rob Lucci. The two sisters quickly analyzed the situation and came up with a conclusion. We need to get to that door. We need to defeat him. They pointed in the same direction, yet they were talking about different things. The two looked each other in the eye, neither backing down from either idea. As the two were staring each other down, Frankie was about to die. Gomu Gomu no. Luffy's voice had knocked the two girls out of their match and stopped Lucci's fatal blow on Frankie. Jet pistol. Lucci had taken a direct hit and was sent into a crate, blasting it to pieces, shocking everyone in the room. Yuya. Luffy's voice was dead serious, something Riku was not used to. His personality had done a 180 since he started fighting. Why yes. Rather than the laid-back, grinning, goofy, sometimes stupid, captain she met on board the Mary. He was a serious, strong, fighter, ready to do anything for his friends. Get to the door, and bring Robin back. She was speechless, her mouth was opening and closing like a fish on land. He had amazed her more than one time, and it was about time she gave respect to this pirate captain who was the first to defeat her on her first cruise mission after promoting. Lucci had already recovered and turned out to be a devil fruit user, shocking Frankie and Haruhi. He quickly went towards Frankie, ready to kill him. Luckily though, Luffy was just as fast and kicked him. The two were locked on battle, so Frankie and Haruhi took the chance to run for the exit along with Haruhi pulling the deep and thought Riku. Haruhi felt Riku's wrist pull away. They stopped right at the wide open door. Riku was smirking, finally come to a thought and an answer. You can count on it, Luffy. Ah, a penny. Haruhi had stopped and picked it up. Oni-san. Riku whined when her sister had stopped running. There's no time to be picking up pennies. Frankie had kept running. Is that blood? Haruhi was staring at a dark spot near the penny. Riku jogged back over and looked down at it. She checked her bandages and it wasn't red, so it wasn't hers. It occurred to them that this could possibly be Frankie's if not Robin's. Silence enveloped the two. Come on, if we hurry, we could save. Riku shook her head and rephrased her sentence. We will save her. A sound had cracked and a blast of warm, hot air had hit them. It had come from the stairs up ahead. Frankie! They shouted and ran ahead to find him. When they got there, the top of the staircase had been blown up and Frankie was nowhere to be seen, though the two did spot someone just up ahead. They wanted to shout to her, but there was no time for shouting. She was about to cross the gate, and they needed to stop Spandam but they were too far, all the way at the other end of the bridge. They started running as fast as they could with all the energy they had, pumping every bit into their sprint. Just as Robin was going to be pulled across, Spandam's face blew up. Not literally of course, though Riku wished it had. More Marines started falling around Robin by the unknown sniper. Yet one could guess. Riku turned around and looked up. At the top of the tower was Usopp singing his heart out as he posed for the Marines as they spotted him. Riku could also see Zoro and Sanji a few floors below him, watching. Both sisters' attention were turned back though when Spandam could be heard screaming orders. They saw Marines line up with guns as Robin started running and could guess what was about to happen next, so they started off on their track again. Luckily though, Frankie was there and blocked the bullets for Robin. Frankie had gotten a call from Usopp and turned his back, letting his guard down. The Marines were about to shoot the two down, when high-speed arrows had pierced their arms. This time it was Haruhi who was shooting as she ran. Riku was not seen with her. Rather, she ran ahead of her sister. She slide-kicked the first Marine she came across. The second one came up from behind her, using his gun like a club. Spinning quickly, she roundhouse kicked him, and then the third one came from the side. She blocked the gun with one hand and punched him in the gut with the other. Haruhi had run up next to her sister. The two stood as the barricade between the Marines and Robin. "Frankie, hurry up and unlock Robin's handcuffs, we'll cover you," Riku shouted as she and her sister fought with the Marines that came at them, or shot at them. She listened to the sound of keys being thrown to the ground, the ones that didn't work. Then finally, she heard it. The sound she was waiting for. Clack. The cuffs had opened. Clank. They had fallen to the ground. Riku let out a sigh of relief. She could finally relax for a while. She looked over to Haruhi and saw that she also let her shoulders drop. The Marines had stopped attacking out of shock that they had actually unlocked her cuffs. Spandam was actually freaking out due to them defeating CP9 and that the keys were real. "Hey, Nagapana." Frankie could be seen speaking into the Den Den Mushi. "This is Frankie, I unlocked Nico Robin's handcuffs." Cheers could be heard from the other side. Robin went up to the Den Den Mushi. "Nagahana-kun. Thank you. If you are to express your gratitude, do it later, to everyone who worked hard to collect the key," Usopp had told her. She had smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. She turned and faced Riku and Haruhi. "Thank you, Yuki, Riku." Haruhi had given her a nod. Riku smiled and responded. "No problem." A panic look came across her face. "I am not Riku. I'm Yuya." Who is this Riku you speak of?" She waved her hand in front of her face as if wiping the identity away. Robin couldn't help but chuckle. She then set her eyes on Spandam. Cease fleur. Hands had appeared on him. Slap. The hands had repeatedly started slapping him in the face. Clap, clap, clap. Riku watched in awe. "Bravo. Bravo." Haruhi looked to her sister and laughed. "You really don't like him, do you?" "Not at all. And Robin despises him, so I think we can be good friends." "Okay guys, come over here quick. I'll prepare the escape," Frankie shouted into the Den Den Mushi. The two sisters turned from the show to look at Frankie. "What's the escape anyways?" Riku asked, curious to how they plan on getting out. Before Frankie could answer, a loud sound had turned everyone's heads. The fence around Eni's lobby was blown up. Another fire went off. The cannon had shot and after a few seconds the tower was hit. For a while, nothing was heard, but the sound of the judicial tower crumbling and burning. Realization hit Robin, Frankie, Haruhi, and Riku soon enough after the top of the tower had fallen into the endless pit. Usopp was on that tower. No one said a word, they just stared. Finally the Den Den Mushi rang. "Frankie, Robin-chan, Yuki-san, Yuya-san." It was Sanji's voice. "We're all safe, we'll head over now." A breath of air was released from Haruhi and Riku. Robin just said an, "Oh, good." Frankie was ready to fight the group of Marines conscious. "We need to do something about this situation." Everyone went into a fighting stance showing they were ready. "Do you guys see that on the other side of the bridge?" "Our way to escape," Riku stated in understanding. Robin nodded. "A small SM guess there's no other way than stealing the ship. What in God's name is that?" Slap. Excuse me." Riku held her painful red cheek in her hand as she bowed in apology to Kokura the mermaid. An angry sister next to her, making sure she's apologizing. "For my rudeness." Riku's eyes moved over to the unconscious bunch of people next to Kokura. "Are they okay?" she pointed out in a small voice. "I bet they experienced some severe shock. Since they've all reached a state of apparent death, they didn't swallow much water," Frankie explained to the group. "It makes sense." Haruhi thought about it for a while before finally agreeing. Kokura looked at the Strafats that she had saved. It was all of them excluding Luffy and Robin. Luffy was still fighting with the CP9 Rob Lucci, while Robin was already on the ship, safe and sound. "I wonder what caused their apparent death," Kokura questioned as she watched to see if anyone from the group would wake. Frankie and Riku bluntly told her, "It was you, Bonk." "OWW. Why only me?" Frankie said the same thing. Riku clutched her head that was starting to swell abnormally, tears prickling at the corner of her eyes. "Because you're my sister, and I expect more from you." Haruhi held her fist near her as if ready for another strike. "Well, I'm sorry," Riku mumbled sarcastically. "What did you say?" Haruhi held her punch above Riku's head in a threatening way. She dashed over to the edge of the ship. "You're the greatest sister ever." She cupped her hands over her mouth and shouted it over the edge. Haruhi looked doubtful at her sister, and then smiled. She turned her head over to Kokura, who was talking to Robin. Then out of nowhere, 3 of the Straw Hats woke up. They were Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp, Sogeking. The first thing Sanji said was, Is Nami-san alright?" Though Nami was still unconscious along with Chopper, Chimney, and Ganbei. The other 2 woke up hacking water. When they saw Kokura though, they froze. They are so going to get it from Oni-san, Riku couldn't help but think. Yet out of respect she was behind Haruhi making an X with her arms and the neck-cutting gesture, her arms frantically swinging about. Sadly though, they glanced at her and she was completely ignored. "Ah, so it's true, mermaids don't exist," Usopp couldn't help but scream while staring. "So it's true that dugongs were mistaken for mermaids." Zoro was very much shocked. Riku couldn't help but face palm at them. For a second there, she actually believed them to be smarter than her. Sanji was turned away from Kokura as to not look at her. He still had hope. Riku shook her head sadly at him. "Idiot, she hasn't said whether she's a mermaid or not. Don't give up on your dream." Then Kokura just crushed his dream by saying one simple line. "I'm a Shirao mermaid." "No!" Sanji cried out in frustration. Whack, slap, bonk. The 3 pirates were seeing stars floating around their heads. "What was that for, lady?" Zoro angrily got up after his head had cleared. Haruhi placed her hands on her hips before responding. "Not lady, it's Haruhi Yuki." Usopp and Sanji looked towards the sound of her voice and name. "Yuki-san." They seemed thrilled to see her. "Hey." She smiled and waved. Sanji's happy look was torn off of his face as he remembered something. "That's right. Your sister's looking for you." Just as those words came out of his mouth, Riku waved her hand in the air with a small, "Right here." The 2 turned their heads once more, and sure enough, Riku aka Yuya Shinha, the girl with blue hair, was standing in front of them. Zoro mumbled something around the lines of "why blue hair," and Riku overheard. She retorted with, "Why green hair?" Soon enough, the 2 started bickering about hair color. Haruhi ignored them and turned to Kokura. "Not trying to be rude or anything, but mermaids don't usually have legs." It was a question in the form of a statement. Though Sanji and Usopp nodded their heads, agreeing with her. "Mermaid's tail fin splits in 2 when we reach the age of 30, that way we can live on land and water." "Bring it on, you piece of booger. You'll see when you reach Fishman Island one day." "Boogers aren't even green, they're yellow." Zoro had his swords pulled out. Everyone's attention was soon turned elsewhere. "Like, P." Riku whispered, narrowing her eyes. "Some boogers are green though, and you're one of them." She got into her fighting stance and Zoro did the same. "I'll slice you in 2, blue cheese." He pointed one of his katanas at her. Her fighting stance fell. "Blue cheese isn't really blue, you know, it's just the little lines on it." His sword fell to his side as he shouted at her angrily, "And it's named after those ugly little blue lines on them." "Well, I find the lines to be very interesting or artistic for your information." She crossed her arms with a smug look on her face. Robian, the fuming Zoro, and smug Riku turned to the familiar shout. Chopper and Nami had woken up and tackle-hugged Robin. "I'm glad you're safe," Nami told her with tears in her eyes. Chopper was straight out crying while calling her name. Bobbin, Riku and Haruhi had to admit, it was adorable. "Huh? I can't move." Chopper soon realized, though it was amazing that he managed to tackle-hugged Robin in that shape. "I'll tell you when this all ends," Zoro said before turning away and walking. Riku looked towards her opponent before following, along with Usopp. "Zoro!" Masked Usopp called out to him. Zoro-kun." His voice tone changed. He had spoken in a normal voice, yet they were still quite far behind him. "Look at that." He was facing the burning island of Eni's lobbies. Riku and Usopp walked up next to him, and gazed at the sight. The dark smoke hovered over the buildings. "This must have happened to Ohara," Riku said out of nowhere. The Usopp looked at her confused. She quickly managed to put something together. Ohara was the place Robin was born at, and she said it was attacked by the Buster Call. "But anyways, why hasn't the bridge been attacked yet?" She turned the discussion around. Her question was answered by Frankie, who was walking up from the ship. Apparently there was an order not to kill Nico Robin, he explained after overhearing the conversation. So that means they still plan to get her back, huh? Zoro had his arms crossed, never taking his eyes off the blazing inferno. Riku this time gave her thoughts on all this. Probably, when you think about it, she is the only one who can read poneglyphs, which hold the answers to the ancient weapons, which the government wants to get a hold of. They all gave her some of the strangest looks ever. She finally put together what she had just said. Forget I said anything about that. They tilted their heads as if they didn't even get half of it. Frankie was the first who spoke after the silence. After they demolish Eni's lobby, they'll come get her, like Blue Girl said. I have a name, the small voice in the background called. Well, everyone's all worn out, but we still have strong ones on the ship, right? Where's Luffy? Usopp asked all in a breath. He's over on the bridge. I see smoke coming from their battle on the bridge's first prop. His opponent is of course that pigeon guy, Rob Lucci. Zoro stated, staring at the exact location he had just pointed out. He's close by, we should lend him a hand, Usopp suggested. Okay. I see where I am in this conversation. Don't even try, the pigeon guy isn't ordinary. We must keep the escape route open, even if the warships come at us. And we'll wait for Luffy here, Zoro ordered. Since he was first mate, he did get some responsibility, especially when it comes to combat. Nami's usually responsible for the rest of the things, such as planning. You know what? I'm gonna go hang out with Nami and Robin. They're cooler than you guys anyways. Can people die so easily? Nami's words cut through the still air. Riku had wondered the same thing. The Frankie family risked their lives for their Aniki. If she stayed on there, would she have also died? She feels like she's gotten stronger since the last battle against Kanan, but still, if she was on that island, she would have died because she is human, just as Nami had said. Of course she wouldn't go down without a fight. Haruhi seemed to have similar thoughts going through her head. Riku glanced at her sister from the corner of her eye, and Haruhi seemed depressed and down. Her eyes were casted to the ground from the new of the Frankie family. Suddenly, Riku remembered something and pulled Haruhi aside from the group. She knew it would have been best to wait until they got back to Water 7 safely, but what if they never made it at all? She at least wanted to know before she died. Riku? Haruhi could see that her sister was having difficulty putting words together. Are you okay? Riku finally put together her determined look and stared at Haruhi straight in the eyes. Oni-san, what happened 7 years ago? She clearly saw the surprised look on Haruhi's face, her mouth opened to respond, but she turned her head away. You don't remember? Was she supposed to remember? This has been eating her at every angle for years. Why didn't she remember? Why can't she remember? What happened 7 years ago? Riku felt the vibes of frustration run through her. Her stomach churned and chest tightened as well as her throat. It was squeezing the life out of her. That's why I need to know. She croaked as her eyes started to water, though she bit them back from falling. Haruhi's eyes were casted downward, and for some reason, she couldn't stop the chuckle that came out of her. I bet you can already make out one thing from when I screamed at you at the cafe. Thinking back to when Haruhi ran out of the cafe, Riku thought about their conversation. When she came to the part, her mind froze. She had died. No one wanted to move or talk. Haruhi brought her head up slightly and looked at Riku. Could we wait to talk about this until we get back to Water 7? She was expecting the answer to be no, but rather than that, Riku lifted her head to the so that the tears wouldn't fall and let out a soft, yeah. Not even the large explosion of Luffy and Lucci's fight could enter their little bubble of sorrow, though it did cause Riku to turn her head towards the sound. After Haruhi saw her sister's head move, she looked in the same direction and recognized it as the direction Luffy was in. That boy, Luffy, I've seen him somewhere before. And after those words, Riku left to join the others. When she went to where Nami and Robin was along with Chopper, Ganbei, Chimney, and Kokura, they were all staring at the first prop. When Riku looked, she saw that the bridge they were anchored next to had been annihilated in the middle and the first prop at the end had been shot into. No emotion had been shown on her face when Nami turned to see Riku. The passive look worried Nami as she watched Riku walk to the bridge stairs and up, heading to where Zoro, Sanji, Usopp and Frankie were, which was located where the bridge had ended broken off. Her ears twitched as she listened closely. "We're all at the bridge safely," she heard Frankie's voice shout. "Don't worry about us, Luffy-kun," Usopp screamed. "We got Robin-chan safely, too," Sanji had yelled. When she made it to the top of the staircase, she sprinted. They all turned to the sound of her footsteps. "Luffy," he looked up at his name and watched as the girl ran. "Don't you dare lose." She stopped right at the edge, where the bridge had broken off. "No matter what, we're going back to Water 7. Zoro had smirked at her sentence. "Defeat him," he shouted along with her. Usopp, Sanji and Frankie joined. "We're getting out of here together, alive." Riku also ended up smirking. "Beat him up," she gave him a fist pound gesture. He returned it back with a large grin. When she saw that, her smirk fell into a smile. "We have no need for people below the rank of lieutenant commander to go to the front. Assault unit of 200. Ha! I'm a commodore," Riku mumbled under her breath. "Did you say something, Yuya-san?" Usopp asked in his Sogeking voice. Nothing at all. I just said that it's going to take more than captains and commanders to beat these guys," she screamed to the Marines. Wait, captains? They would be on the same level as the smoked bastard smoker? Riku of course recognized the name. She had to admit, she believed him to be way better than his current rank. She sighed, believing it was luck that helped her get to her rank as well as Garp's influence. "Huh? Where's Sanji? He was here a minute ago," Usopp asked the group. "What? Where the hell did that idiot cook go?" Zoro shouted. When Riku looked around, sure enough, he wasn't there. "Charge!" shouted one of the Marines in charge. "Retrieve Nico Robin." The announcement had concluded. "Like I'm going to let that happen," Riku shouted as she fisted a Marine in the face. "Not after everything we've been through." From the corner of her eye, she saw a Marine going to swing at Usopp. She dashed her way through the oncoming Marines, but Zoro made it just before her. "Why are you dozing off?" Zoro shouted the question Riku had been wondering herself. They both looked up to find that in his hand was his mask. Riku looked to see what shocked Usopp so much to take off his mask. What she saw had her worried. Luffy lay unmoving next to Lucci, blood seeping from every scrape on his body. "Luffy! Wake up! What are you doing?" Usopp shouted to the top of his lungs. "Luffy!" Riku took a step closer to look at Usopp's face. He looked to be in bad condition, with his nose bandaged, along with bruises and cut on his face. Looking to the others, she couldn't help but notice everyone wasn't looking too great either. A Marine had attacked her, she dodged left and managed a punch to the gut. She looked and saw a group of Marines that were planning to attack Usopp from behind. She ran past him to cover his back. 1, 2, 3, Riku couldn't help but count each time a Marine fell by her. 4, 5. "Don't misunderstand me, I'm only here to rescue Robin." This brought Riku back. She still didn't know the reason why Usopp wore the mask. It fooled no one but Luffy and Chopper. Then again, who's she to tell him when she too has disguised herself? "Hey you, boss of CP9. I'll be your next opponent, come and get me." Freezing after hearing that sentence, she gave Usopp the, "Are you crazy? You're going to die. Look." Then she bit her tongue, and felt of no use fighting these Marines. Though Luffy was still far, Riku could hear faintly his voice. Even if the Marines wouldn't shut up, she had to deal with the screaming Marines as she put her ears to the test. "Don't try, you, stop." Her heart had clenched. She hasn't felt this feeling in quite a while, but she recognized it. It was worry. Riku was worried for a boy she just met a few days ago. He had kidnapped her, and nagged her to no end. Yet there was that small shed of warmth that rolled off of him along with recognition. Always ignoring the feeling and replacing it with annoyed hatred, she could no longer hold the pent-up feeling. She looked down to her hands, which had started bleeding without her knowing. It was numb, either from the medicine she had taken a while ago, or the pain and blood coursing through them. She clenched her fists tightly. "Luffy, get up and fight. You said you would handle him, right?" Though Luffy couldn't see her, he heard her voice, but rather than registering it as Yuya, it came as someone else. "Riku?" He could hardly believe his ears. Her eyes widened slightly at the sound of her name. She stopped fighting to allow this to sink in. "Yes, it's me." She looked over to Usopp, who was shocked to figure out it was Riku. She gave him a quick smile before turning away into the heat of battle again. "Riku? I've heard that name before," a marine had said after listening to the conversation. Where? Riku had caught that and swiftly ran over to him. Who's Riku? You heard nothing. He looked up at her as she came running. He took a quick pause to figure out what was going on, though it was too late. Memory punch. And with a ton of power, she knocked the marine unconscious so that when he woke, it would be with a major headache and no memory of Riku. As she stood over the unconscious marine, her face had changed and was smiling widely. She didn't know why, but he was just happy and relieved. Chuckling at her own behavior in the battle, it turned into a full-blown laugh. To her, it felt like there were no more secrets, yet there were so many around her. The marines that had surrounded her looked at her as if she was crazy. Ignoring the marines, she turned her head to see Luffy standing back up. Usopp had told him to win and everyone would go back together. That gave him the strength he needed, the strength of friends. I guess if he's going to push his body to the limit, I might as well too, she mumbled as the surrounding marines attacked her all at once. Moving swiftly, she grabbed the marines closest to her and swung him into the others. After a while, most of the marines had stopped attacking, disbelief written across all of their faces. Riku looked to the prop that had suddenly become quiet. Her smile just became larger as she laughed. Usopp had voiced her thoughts. Luffy won. 5 marine ships had them all surrounded. Oni-san. Riku ran over to her side. Hey, you okay? Haruhi nodded. I'm fine, but what about Luffy-kun? She looked over to the first prop. Riku followed her gaze but said nothing. Everyone, jump into the sea. Usopp's voice had sounded over everyone's panicking, and everyone looked at him like he was crazy except the rest of the Straw Hats. Into the ocean. The rest of the Straw Hat crew shouted to the skies. What? Are you guys crazy? What? Riku yelled as she saw them starting to jump off, though was surprised when she felt her body being pulled over the edge and into the sea. Looking over next to her, she found the source. Oh, Oni-san. Haruhi turned her face to Riku and smiled. They're good people, Riku, so we should trust in them, she said as they fell towards the salty waters below. Riku looked up, or at least down to where her head was going to hit, and noticed a ship below next to her landing spot. She recognized it instantly as the Going Merry. No way. She whispered wide-eyed. She splashed into the ocean after. When she made it to the surface, she and Haruhi swam to the ship where Zoro helped pull Haruhi up and Riku jumped on deck herself. She turned to Luffy, who was about to thank Robin, but Robin had stopped him from saying any more. Everyone. Thank you. She told the group. Riku, still mesmerized by the ship appearing, walked over to the mast and placed her hand over it. Thanks, Mary, she whispered. Hey, do you know where Usopp and Riku are? They're missing, Luffy asked while holding onto Chopper. Usopp had put his mask back on and Riku with blue hair, blue eyes and different clothing. Sanji was mentally telling Usopp to show himself while Haruhi kept nudging Riku with her elbow. Don't worry, they went back first with a boat. Usopp covered for the two. Riku decided to change the subject for once. So how did you guys know to jump? Zoro answered first. I heard a voice calling us. The rest of the Straffats agreed, except Luffy believed it to be Mary's, yet the others were finding it impossible. Haruhi listened in on the conversation but soon noticed something in the distance. Hey, isn't that the Galley Company's ship? Everyone then turned and saw many people on the ship celebrating their survival and return. Just then, there was a large creak and the sound of splitting wood. The front half of the Mary had broken and fallen forward. Riku examined the damage as Luffy begged Iceberg to fix the Going Merry. It must have pushed ship came. I understand. With Luffy's words, everyone started getting ready to leave. Rowboats were set up and they filed off the ship one by one. Silence followed the group as the atmosphere was heavy with grieving. Riku stood by the mast waiting, and when the time came, she let her fingers graze the beautiful boat she never knew. Climbing into the boat with the others, she stood next to her sister. Riku, Haruhi asked quietly. What's wrong? Of course Haruhi was also sad, but she could tell something was really bugging her sister about this. I never knew it, but there's some sort of magic that seems to go with it. It has its own life. Riku then said no more. Death will follow everywhere with everyone and everything. Mary. The bottom of the sea is dark and lonely, so we'll see you off here. Luffy was in a separate boat next to the ship with a torch in hand. Thank you for carrying us all this time. He then moved the torch closer, and the ship was gently lit to flames. A flurry of white passed Riku's eyes. It was snow. Nami held her hand out as a crystal snowflake landed and disappeared. Her eyes filled with water, as she started to cry silently as well as some of the other Straw Hats. "I'm sorry." Riku's eyes widened slightly as she heard the voice. Right away, she as well as the Straw Hat crew could tell it was from the Mary. "I'm sorry, I wanted to carry you a bit farther. I wanted to go on more adventures with you, but we're the ones who have to apologize," Mary, Luffy bawled. "I'm no good at navigating and I crash you a lot. I even ripped the sails sometimes. Zoro and Sanji are idiots, so they broke many things too." Luffy kept shouting, telling how sorry they were, how dear Mary was to them, yet how they were so reckless. "Usopp has always tried to fix you, but he's no good at it either." There was a slight pause. "We're so sorry. But I was happy. Thank you for taking good care of me until now. I was really happy." Mary's voice had faded to the crackling of the flames. Luffy screamed the name of his crew's beloved ship.